So I play a lot of games, and not all of them are worth making an entire video about, but it seems like a waste to play all these games and not say anything about them. So for this video, I wanted to do something a little bit different. I just want to go through some of the smaller indie titles that I've played this year and just have a little chat about them. This is an unscripted video, so it's all coming straight from a noggin, and we're just gonna vibe, we're just gonna chill, we're just gonna talk about some fun games. How does that sound? I'm not going through these in any particular order other than order I played them, I guess, which means to start off, we're going to be all the way back in January with games that I barely remember. But we'll make it work, I'm sure. It's going to be fine. Don't worry about it, it's going to be fine. The first game on the list is Call of the Sea, a first-person exploration puzzle game. I played this back in January, so I'm a bit fuzzy on the details, but I remember enjoying it. It's very pretty for one, but more importantly, the puzzle design was very good. In a lot of games that we call walking simulators, the puzzles can be a bit, whatever. But in this one, there are some genuinely engaging, brain teasers to think about. There was one time, especially, that I did have to look up a guide, which, maybe that's good or bad, you tell me, but it shows that the puzzles are at least in-depth enough that you require a guide. Without giving too much away, the game is a very loose adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft, though adaptation isn't maybe the right word, it's more of a sidequel, like a spin-off of Lovecraft. And what I think was really interesting about it is that they adapted Lovecraft's work in a way that wasn't horror. Obviously Lovecraft is famous for horror stories, fear of the unknown and all this, but in this game it was less fear of the unknown and more curiosity about it. Which is an interesting take. Actually, I think it's a more interesting take. And it does the same with the Lovecraft aesthetic, very deep sea themed, the fear of deep underwater. Whereas this game takes that and twists it where underwater is now beautiful. This is a good time. I recommend it. I'm realizing this is going to be very hard to edit. Maybe I should have scripted this. Oh well, we're in it now. Next on our list is a game called Aragami. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, I hope so. It's been a while since I played the game, but oh boy, this game took me by surprise. I think I picked this one up as a Games with Gold, and I knew absolutely nothing about it other than stealth ninja game. As it turns out, that's an understatement. Aragami is one of the best stealth games I've ever played. It takes all of the stealth mechanics you're used to and just amplifies them to where you really feel like a super badass ninja. In the game, your basic movement speed is a walk, which is very uncommon for an action game, but that's because this is full stealth. If you run about trying to stab everyone, you will just get cut down instantly. It's a one-hit kill system, which really forces you to change how you play. I'm not great at stealth games, but in most stealth games like your Assassin's Creeds or your Dishonored, if you get caught, it's pretty easy to just kill everyone anyway. In this game, it's not so much, and it really forces you to think about stealth differently, especially with the main mechanic of the game, which is shadows. While you're in shadows, you're almost completely invisible, and all of your powers are based on being in shadows. If you're in sunlight for too long, you will just lose all of your powers instantly. So the game is all about scuttling through the darkness. It also helps, and I feel like I'm gonna say this a lot, the game is very pretty. It's just really nice to look at. It has a kind of simplistic cartoony art style that doesn't detract from the vibe of the game in any way. I know a sequel just came out very recently and it's a co-op game of some sort, so hey friends, if you're listening, it's on Game Pass. You want to play a ninja game with me? Next up on our list is Haven. Where to begin with Haven? Well, I think the best place to begin with Haven is the phenomenal soundtrack, which really defines this game. I'm not much of a music connoisseur myself, but my god, every single song on the soundtrack just slaps hard. I'm just gonna play some while I talk over it right now, and if you're not bopping your head along by the end, I'm shocked. Actually, maybe I'll just do that for all the games, play the soundtracks, because let's face it, most of these games have pretty great soundtracks. Haven is a sci-fi love story, and it's maybe the best love story I've ever seen in a video game. It's a genre that games don't normally go after unless you're talking about dating sims. All of the game is entirely built around the relationship between the two playable characters, U and K, which unfortunately means their ship name is UK, but I don't know what to say about that. It seems weird. The game is, I think, designed for co-op, but I played it myself and I never felt any trouble doing so, mostly because the game It's not really designed to be difficult. It does have combat in it, but if anything, combat is the weakest part of the game by far, and something that's more look-overable. This is my problem with going unscripted, is I just don't think of words and my brain just goes, and then I say something dumb like look-overable. It definitely blurs the lines between game and visual novel, although it's definitely more gamey than something like a Telltale game, even if most of the gameplay is whizzing around cleaning up goop, which somehow isn't the only game where you whiz around and clean up goop that's on this list. I don't want to get too in-depth in the story, but it's very nice, it's very well written, it has a very modern understanding of relationships, and it is sci-fi, and there's like lots of sci-fi twists, but it is a love story first and foremost. And it has one of the worst bad endings I've ever seen. Do not pick the bad ending. Hades. Are we counting Hades as an indie game? I don't give a shit. It's fucking amazing and I want to talk about it. Hades was my game of the year last year. I know it technically didn't come out last year, but that's when it came out on Xbox, so that's when I got to play it, and my god, does it live up to the hype. No comments. What an amazing game. I've never seen a game that's so perfectly considered in design in all its aspects. The way it blends the narrative with the game is one of the most impressive things I've ever seen. The way it incorporates the looping systems into the actual story. It's just so friggin' cool. On the most basic level, the combat is so fun to play that you don't even mind running through it 100 times because you feel yourself getting better and better every single run. The first time you lose to Meg and then the third time when you beat her, it builds perfectly on a purely gameplay basis where it feels every time that you're making progress. I wanted to make a video specifically about Hades, but let's face it, that's been a little bit overdone and I couldn't think of anything unique to say about the game, just yeah, it's amazing, no complaints. Genesis Noir. This is a weird one. I don't even know how to describe this game. It's one of the most creative games I've ever seen. To the point where I don't know how to talk about it, I don't know how to describe it. It's a thing that you just have to play in order to understand. It's one of those games where the story is highly interpretive, which normally I can't stand, but in this one it's just so well done and so visually amazing to look at that I don't mind that the story is mostly interpretive. It's one of those things where if you look at clips of the game, I'm not sure you would even identify it as a game. It's one of those games where things will just seamlessly slip from cutscene to gameplay, where the lines between what those things even mean merge. And it still has some fairly intricate puzzle work in there. Ultimately, I don't know if the story is as important as the vibe and the mood that the game gives, which, again, is an argument that I never thought I'd find myself making because I normally hate that shit. But for this one, it worked. I don't know, maybe I just like noir detectives. Unpacking is a game which severely exceeded my expectations of it. It's a game where you unpack things to move into new houses. It doesn't sound like a game that should be relaxing, and yet somehow it's extremely relaxing. It's got a great combination of a simplistic pixel art style, which, again, normally I hate, a really great soundtrack, and really in-depth story work, which I wasn't expecting. It's sort of a puzzle game where you figure out where things are supposed to go, like posters up on walls, kitchen utensils in the kitchen. But the other puzzle is the narrative aspect of it, trying to figure out who your character is, what's going on in their life. It's interesting that a game can have such an interesting story with no dialogue. It's a way of telling stories that's almost exclusive to video games. Plus, the Foley work is just ridiculous. I know that's a weird thing to praise, but there's different sounds for every single object and every single surface you can think of. It's an insane amount of detail. Islanders is probably one of the prettiest games on this list, and probably one of the most relaxing. It's a game where you build little towns on little islands, and that's basically the game. It has an almost therapeutic quality to it, where whatever you build, no matter how pretty it is, none of it can stay. You always have to move on. So I always have an issue in games and in most things where if I build something, it's because I want other people to see it, but the towns and cities you build in Islanders, they're just for you. And I think there's something beautiful in that, in art that's only for you. The Gunk feels like a proof of concept for a game. It's a game where you suck up gunk. I know, you never would have guessed from the title. It's good, I liked it, but it feels like the start of a game as opposed to the entire game. There's amazing work on display. The art style is so gorgeous that it's almost distracting sometimes. And there's a lot of interesting hints at story details, but for the most part it is walking through nice environments cleaning up goop. And hey, I like walking through environments and cleaning up goop apparently, especially when you add a scanner. I love me a scanner. But it's certainly a game that I feel like there could be more to it. And maybe there would be. I think this is one game where a sequel would add drastically to the experience. Art of Rally. What a vibe this game is. It's not the sort of game I would normally play, a car game, I'm not usually into those. But I saw the pictures of it, I saw the art style, I saw the fact that nothing was capitalized for some reason, and I thought that looks like a vibe. What none of the pictures show you is the soundtrack, which I know I've talked about soundtracks a bunch already, but what a vibe. This is one of those games that's really easy to zone out to. You drive along in these low poly environments listening to this amazing synthwave soundtrack, and you just kind of forget the world. It's clear this game was made by people who love Rally, which isn't me, but I still got a lot out of the game anyway. Sometimes the low poly art, especially with the shadow effects, looks a bit odd and a little bit unfinished, but those moments are few and far between, and I think the vibe still comes through it perfectly. Last but not least on our list, even though I technically played it this year, but we're only a week into 2022, so I think you'll allow it, is Sable. Sable is basically Breath of the Wild if you took out all the combat. It has the same climbing and exploration and puzzle solving, but with none of the evil people to get in your way. It's all about the exploring, and it's a really relaxing experience. I feel like I've said relaxing a lot. Can you tell that I don't play a lot of super difficult games? It's one of those games where you just pick a direction and go and see what you find, and I love that sort of thing. It's definitely a bit janky, like you can feel the game bursting at the seams almost, but it stays together for the most part, and it's just a really nice time. I'm being vague on a lot of the story details for these games because my hope is you'll go and play them yourself. And for this one especially, I think you should play it yourself. I mean, I think you should play all of them, but I don't know, this one is a good entry point for indie games, I feel, because it has enough depth to be a long time experience while also not being too difficult. A lot of people don't play indie games, which is very disappointing because especially these days AAA games are just not giving me what I want, and especially if they're gonna add fucking NFT support, oh my god. Maybe that'll be a video one day, we'll see. But indie games can offer a whole wide array of experiences, which I've always really appreciated about them. There would never be a AAA game where the entire point of the game is just to explore a pretty environment. That's just not going to happen. But an indie game can make that happen, and with modern games, Sable can be pretty big. I mean, it's a large world to explore with lots of different exciting things to find. So yeah, if you're wanting to get into indie games, I recommend Sable as your first go. Well, this was an experiment. I've never really done a full unscripted video like this before, so we'll see if I can salvage it in the edit, because let me tell you, we're on 31 minutes of recording time, and this video is not going to be 31 minutes long. If this goes down well, I'll try and make it an annual thing. In fact, I'll make it an annual thing anyway, if I want to, because this is my channel, and I'll do whatever the hell I want. I don't know how to end this video. You should play indie games, they're good.
Crazy.
It's like if that happened at the start of Infinity War and then the rest of the movie they were fighting against Ebony Maw. Like,
and then Thanos shows up in the post-credit where the Captain Marvel thing starts off with Sam Jackson. Yeah.